Voting isn't just going to the polls anymore on Election Day. Options like early voting, mail-in voting, and ballot drop boxes are available to more voters and are growing in popularity. How to Vote is a tool created by Democracy Works, and it breaks down the options your state offers by forecasting a ballot, empowering you to decide where and when to vote. Democracy works best when we all vote, but misinformation and confusion about election procedures have resulted in low voter turnout. How to Vote takes the guesswork out of the voting process. It is easy to use and helps folks from all over the country overcome many of the process barriers to voting. It is committed to helping you vote no matter what. You can use the How to Vote tool to sign up for election reminders, see what's on your ballot, get step-by-step assistance requesting your mail ballot, explore your options for returning your mail-in ballot, check your voter registration status, and find your local polling site, and make sure that you have an appropriate ID to bring with you. Decide when and where you'll vote this year at howto.vote.
Hello and welcome to the formal review. Today, we will be having a very special episode. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the formal review. Thanks for tuning in.
I'm Andre, the critic for Box Office Buzz.
In this special episode 10, we will be looking at the top 5 films of the year so far. Now, we have gone through half of the year when it comes to film. Let's look back and see how this year has turned out. There's been a lot of good films. There's been, honestly, a lot of stinkers too. So some of these films, I did not do a podcast because I just started this 10 episodes ago, so obviously there's some films that there isn't an episode on it, but I did write full reviews. If you go to Box Office Buzz, they're all there, and you can read my full thoughts on them. When it comes to the actual episodes that I did do, I'll reference you to those as necessary. Before I get started, some of my discussion of these films will have a little bit of spoilers, so be careful as you progress, but I'm going to try to keep it as vague as possible, as I always do. Given that I'm only going to give my top 5 films of the year, there are obviously films that are going to require some honorable mentions. Now, the first honorable mention I want to have is A Quiet Place. As a lot of people did, I really liked this film because of how innovative it was. It's a horror film that has to deal with taking away something that we take for granted on a daily basis, and obviously, yeah, it does have problems, but this is one of the most thrilling experiences that I've had at a movie theater in a really long time. I dropped Skittles. I felt like I was going to die right then. Also, was a film that I actually saw fairly recently, is Incredibles 2. Now, I really enjoyed this film a lot as a big Pixar fan. I think that the animation looked great, the music was fantastic, the message and themes were great as well. I just thought that the villain kind of was a little bit lacking when it came to the first film. Another honorable mention would be the film Hereditary. I found this movie immensely creepy. The acting is great. Toni Collette is beyond amazing. It could become a horror classic, but my problem with it is that there wasn't a overall message. And that for me is one of my biggest things about a film, is that what makes this significant? What message does it have? Now, I did talk about this film in a little bit more detail in episode 3, so if you want to hear my full review on it, go check that out. Another honorable mention is You Were Never Really Here. Now, I think this was a brilliant film. It was directed well, actors were fantastic. Altogether, it was a very well done film. But my problem is, for me personally, it was very hard to like. It's such a dark and grim world that the main character could kill himself at any moment. You don't really get to know him very much, and that for me takes away from its rewatchability, because otherwise I think this film is fantastic. Those are my honorable mentions. Now we're gonna go starting into my top 5 best films in the first 6 months of 2018.
Number 5. Paddington 2.
Paddington 2 is absolutely lovely. It blows me out of the water when it comes to how wonderful it is. And it's acted great. I know this film was released in the UK in 2017, but it was released in the States in 2018, so that's why I do include this film. Hugh Grant is probably the best part about this film, and I think that the message of what this film is trying to discuss when it comes to immigration, when it comes to who looks like a criminal, and how diverse and multicultural everything everyone is that lives in his neighborhood, and how he says, if we're kind and polite, the world will be right. This is a kid's film. And for me, going into a film like this, even if you don't really attach to these messages, the rest of the film is so enjoyable that you can't deny the fact of how lovely it is. And it's such a simple plot. All it is about is Paddington wants to get his aunt a birthday gift. That's it. The message of this film is great in that it's not preachy. It's just allowing for children to have conversations with their parents about it. And I think that's one of the best things that a film can do. And honestly, I liked the first one, but it wasn't that great to me. This one nailed it. As a movie sequel, it's one of the best sequels because it made me fall in love with this bear. It's funny. If you haven't seen it, check it out right away.
Number 4. Black Panther.
Yeah, it is a comic book movie. I love my comic book movies. I love superheroes. Obviously, I love this film. It's at the top when it comes to the Marvel films. The acting was fantastic. Direction was great. You have Ryan Coogler in his 3rd film doing such a fantastic job. And pretty much everyone, whenever they get on screen, just steals it. You got such a great cast in this that even though it goes down a lot of superhero tropes, how Coogler taps into the debates of Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X, of passive resistance versus militant activism. This concept is a message that it's not an origin story in the traditional sense. We're not learning about this guy who is run down or he has something that hits him and he has to go become the character. No, he is already Black Panther and now he has to try to become king. That's why this is so different from other superhero movies. It's not about him becoming a superhero. It's about him becoming a king. And that's why this is such a good... And how Killmonger or Njobu is actually a fairly sympathetic villain in that you kind of understand him. Yes, he's a villain. Yes, there's a negative push towards him. But he's a representation of how injustices against people of color, this complexity of his character, one, makes him one of the better villains in the entire MCU. You see the parallel between T'Challa and Njobu that Malcolm and Martin had, and this is shown in many visuals as well of how they're essentially the opposite sides of a coin that rival Professor X and Magneto in the X-Men films, because those are based off this Martin and Malcolm as well. Some of the CGI could have been better, but I mean, for a superhero film, I think it's one of the top films. And when it comes to how comic books have been progressive on paper, this is one of the few films that is trying to be progressive on screen for a superhero. And I think that was why this film is definitely worth watching more and more. But that's only number 4. So what's next?
Number 3. Blockers.
The reason why I put this above Black Panther is because it's also another mold breaker when it comes to genres. But it's original in that aspect because when it comes to movies like this that have to do with teenage sexuality, the majority of the films out there concentrate on the guy's point of view. Now, this was a film that concentrated on the girl's side of it and how a double standard it is between the two. If a guy says he's going to go hook up with somebody, they're praised, versus a girl, they try to protect her. This is something that hadn't been really done before. And I think that this is one of the more hilarious films of the year. And honestly, it was quite refreshing to see this type of story, but not done in a stupid way. I think that the relationships between the characters work really well. And I think that the actors in it are pretty fantastic, especially John Cena. I really hope that he's in more comedic roles. The script, I think, is also really good in that the jokes are very well written. It has a strong message. It's hilarious. I think it's worth checking out by anyone who wants like a humorous film that can honestly appeal to older teenagers and obviously adults as well.
Number 2. First Reformed.
This decision between 1 and 2 was very hard for me because I enjoyed both of them. They both put messages in them. I started thinking about the film as soon as I left the theater. I love them both. Now, this film, I think, was very well written and directed by Paul Schrader, who also did Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and The Last Temptation of Christ. I go into full detail of this film in episode 1. But the reason why I think this film is really great is because of how it deals with the debate between spirituality and realism. It's not being controversial. It's not trying to blow your mind when it comes to intense imagery like Darren Aronofsky's Mother from last year. I love talking about this film afterwards because the film doesn't really give you all the answers, and Schrader wants you to think about the film. And Ethan Hawke, I haven't been a big fan of his, but I think he is one of the really strong parts about this film. And honestly, if you're looking for a film that is provocative in an emotional and intellectual way, this film will provide that for you.
And number 1 goes to Annihilation.
Now, this film I thought was utterly fantastic. This is one of the best sci-fi films that I've seen in a while. The director, Alex Garland, who directed Ex Machina, he also did some writing on 28 Days Later and Dread, takes this sci-fi thriller and digs deep into a human nature. And you can see his inspiration from Alien, The Thing, 2001, A Space Odyssey. This film looks at biology, evolution, and how cells are the center of the world and how small mutations can make a difference. The CGI looks great. The last 15 minutes of this film is probably the most engaged I have been on a film since I saw Blade Runner 2049 for the first time. And the journey that the women have to go through in this film is just emotionally engaging. And how this film goes into concepts of biology and also self-destruction. I think this film allows you to get you into this strange, vivid, very intriguing world. The world that the Shimmer has created and the mutated species are odd, but it looks so beautiful. Every moment of this film is just an experience to see on the big screen. This honestly nightmarish world is gorgeous to look at. The women in this are driven by the curiosity to see what the Shimmer is. And it's one of the very few films where our entire crew is women. There's not stereotypes of characters in that there's one comedic one, there's one fat one. These characters have specific roles in a mission. You have the biologist, you have Cryptic, you have the military one. All of them there are for a specific role. They're intelligent, they're strong, they are able to find out what the Shimmer is when honestly every man who went in there before could not do. And I think Portman herself, this is one of her best performances she's had in her entire career. Everyone else is really good and their characters are very intriguing. Each of them has their own story and reasons for going into the Shimmer. And I think that for me was so engaging to get to know these characters and go into this world with this unknown. Some of the characters weren't given as much opportunity, but that comes into what an ensemble team-up film is not allowed to do. I think so much happens in this film that honestly this could best direction, best sound editing, definitely. Themes and meaning of this film will have you talking days after you see the film. It looks fantastic. Characters are great. If you haven't seen this film, please go watch it. If you liked Ex Machina, you're going to like this. If you like sci-fi, you're going to like this. If you like engaging stories, you're going to like this. If you like good acting, you're going to like this. Now, the only real reason that you shouldn't go see this film, honestly, is if you aren't into sci-fi. Now, those are my top 5 films of the year so far. Now, what is your order? Did you have some of the ones that I have? Would you knock some of them off? Put some of my honorable mentions on? What do you think? Talk to me on Facebook. Talk to me on Twitter. Talk to me on Instagram. The URL is all the same. At The Formal Review. And I really thank you guys for listening today. This was one of my favorite episodes so far because I got to talk about these movies that I really liked. So I'm really hoping that you enjoyed it as much as I did. So please subscribe so you can get more thoughts from me when it comes to movies. I'm on Google Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, and a lot more. You don't want to miss any episodes. So until next time, I'll see you at the movies. Take care, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Formal Review. We hope you'll join us again.